Hi friends, welcome to my channel Series Scribe. In today's video, I want to share with you all about my experience in growing ripe and delicious tomatoes grown at my small balcony garden in Singapore. I used purely food waste compost to nourish my plants, and it felt amazing to see those bright red tomatoes grow from just a bit of kitchen waste. I have always loved gardening since I was young, and I always wanted to provide organic food to my daughter. So instead of using those chemical fertilizers, I made my own kitchen compost from daily kitchen wastes like vegetable peels, fruit scraps, coffee grounds, and eggshells, mixing all the greens and browns together. Over time, this mixture of waste turned into rich and nutritious compost that my tomato plants absolutely thrived on. So in this video, I will take you through the care I gave to these plants, how I prepared the soil, the watering routine I followed, the amount of sunlight they need, and the natural ways I kept those pests away without any harmful sprays. I want to admit that I am not an expert in gardening, but with a lot of interest, passion, and a fair bit of trial and error, I have managed to learn a few things that helped my plants not only survive but also fruit successfully. A few years ago, I came across a book on Korean natural farming, and honestly, that book was a game changer to me. It really inspired me to start creating my own kitchen compost and made me realize that different plants need different techniques and care to thrive. It took me years of experimenting and failing before I finally got my tomatoes to grow big and ripen properly. For example, back in 2024, I did manage to grow a bunch of tomato plants, but the tomatoes turned out super tiny and they were not growing as expected. Initially, I felt so confused, but later I realized my mistake. I had planted 4 tomato plants in a single container. Because of that, none of them got enough space, nutrients, or energy they needed to grow into full-sized fruits. So in my next attempt, I thought I'd fix this issue by planting just 2 tomato plants in one big container. It was definitely an improvement, but even then I noticed that the fruits weren't growing as big as I have hoped. Eventually, I had to make the tough call to remove one of the tomato plants, this way giving the other plant all the space, care, and energy it needed. Just growing one plant in one container made a huge difference, and I finally started seeing the results I had been working towards for so long. So I grew this tomato plant from seeds. From a store-bought tomato, I extracted the seeds and potted them. It is such a simple process. I just removed the seeds, dried them slightly, and then potted them in some good quality soil. Best thing about the tomato seeds is that they germinate really quickly, so you don't have to wait so long to keep those tiny sprouts popping up. In the beginning, it is very important to keep the seedlings away from the direct sunlight until they grow their third set of leaves. Once they get past that stage, morning sunlight becomes super important. Tomato plants love the sunlight, especially that gentle early rays, and they absolutely thrive in hot weather too. One thing I have learned is that regular watering is crucial for tomato plants' growth. For example, if you start watering the plant in the mornings, then it's best to continue that schedule throughout its lifetime. Skipping watering or overwatering can really stress the tomato plant, and you'll notice the leaves starting to wilt or curl. And that's usually a sign that either too much or too little water is being given. So, the curling of the leaves is actually a good way to tell what's going on. It's almost like the plant's way of communicating with us and saying that hey, something is really not right with me. So, keeping an eye on the leaves and sticking to a consistent watering routine can really make a big difference in how healthy and productive your tomato plant turns out. I make sure to monitor my tomato plant every single day. I check the leaves carefully, especially the underside, to see if there are any insects hiding or starting to attack my plant. Fortunately, ever since I started using kitchen compost and giving the plant rich and healthy soil, I have barely seen any insect problems. Honestly, that's been such a relief and I'm really happy about it. It simply shows how powerful natural compost can be to the plants Not only does it feed the plant, but it also keeps it strong enough to resist pests on its own. With the pests out of the picture, my main focus now is on the plant's growth and making sure to remove the suckers regularly. So, staying consistent with constantly checking my tomato plant and removing the suckers, I started noticing tiny buds popping up, which made me so happy. It felt like all the daily care and observation was finally paying off. But as you can see here, I am actually cutting off those initial buds, and I know it might feel a bit strange at first. It is totally normal to feel hesitant about removing those first flowers or buds. It is a necessary step. The reason we do this is to encourage the plant to focus on growing more buds and flowers rather than putting all its energy into just a few early blooms that might turn into fruit too soon. If we let those first flowers grow into fruit right away, the plant might slow down overall growth thinking its job is done. But by trimming those initial buds or flowers, we are actually signaling the plant to keep producing more buds and flowering. And don't worry, once you remove those early flowers, you will soon start to see even more buds popping up, which eventually leads to a much better yield. It's one of those little gardening tricks that makes a big difference over time, and it really helped me to get a healthier and fuller harvest. Once I see the flowers blooming fully, I gently shake the plant near the stem to help with pollination. This method is called hand pollination. This little movement will help the pollen settle and encourages the flower to start turning into fruit. Since we live on the 13th floor, we get pretty strong winds now and then, which actually helps with natural pollination. So I don't always need to hand pollinate, but still, whenever I get time, especially in the morning hours when I'm checking on the plant, I just give it a gentle shake to support the process. Once the flowers are successfully pollinated, they eventually start turning into fruits as long as we keep providing them with the right nutrients. Another important thing to note at this stage is the need to trim off the stems at the base of the plant. This simple step helps redirect the plant's energy from producing excess foliage to focusing on growing the actual tomato fruits. It also allows more sunlight to reach every part of the plant, especially the lower sections, and helps prevent overcrowding of leaves that aren't really needed while the fruit is ripening. Also, there comes a point when you will notice that your tomatoes have stopped growing in size. That's usually a sign that they have reached their full growth potential. At this stage, it is time to stop watering the plant completely. I know that sounds a little extreme, but it is essential to let the plant focus its remaining energy on ripening the fruits. Stopping the water is a signal to the plant that it is time to wrap up and shift its focus fully to the tomatoes ripening. You will see the leaves being to wither and dry out, but don't worry, that is completely normal. At this point, we don't need the leaves anymore. What matters is the fruit. I'll be honest with you, this part always feels a little emotional to me. It's almost like we are watching the plant fade away after all that care, but this is actually a natural and necessary part of the ripening process to get a good yield. The best part is that nothing goes to waste. I use these beautiful organically ripened tomatoes in my cooking, and the dried leaves go right back into my compost bin. So instead of throwing them away, I am giving them back to the soil, continuing the cycle naturally. So here it is, my tomatoes have finally ripened, and it is such a satisfying feeling. I decided to harvest them all and use them in my cooking. But these are not just any tomatoes, they are very special to me. I'm keeping these organically grown tomatoes, especially for my daughter. It's always been my dream to give her homegrown food, something fresh and full of care. Since we live in Singapore and we live in the high rise apartments, I don't have the luxury of a big garden, so I can only grow a few herbs and a couple of tomato plants in my small balcony garden, which I call it as my green oasis. But within that small space itself, I try to do whatever I can to give my daughter the best. And seeing those tomatoes ripen, knowing they came from my kitchen compost, and it really makes it all worth it. And here you can see my mint plant has completely overgrown, so I decided it is the perfect time to give it a full pruning. I'll be using the freshly cut mint in preparing biryani today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please hit the like button and help me share this video among your family and friends. I will see you all in my next video. Until then, stay curious and keep learning.